The La-5FN is an absolute beast of a plane. It's a fairly new plane. It was just introduced by the developers of Il-2 Sturmovik, and it is a Soviet plane, and I believe historically they introduced it in mid-1943. I'm not 100% sure on that, so you might want to check if you're interested. But it is absolutely a beast, especially below altitudes of 2,500 meters, like most Soviet planes. I wanted to make this video just to give the basics on how to operate it. Even though it is a beast, you have to know how to land it, how to take off, have to understand how to operate the engine, manage it, because it is slightly different than other planes within the series, and I think that turns a lot of people off, but it should not, because it can absolutely do incredible damage incredibly quickly, and it's just an awesome aircraft. Now, keep in mind that this video is geared towards people that may not be too familiar with this aircraft. It's only been out, I believe, a couple of weeks, and I myself am not even close to being an expert in it, but I do feel like I've flown it enough recently to have at least a basic grasp and maybe help some people that have never flown it before. So let's begin. We'll start by taking a look at our gauges and finding out what some of the more important ones mean. First, you have the altimeter, which measures your height in meters. The FN performs very well below 3,000 meters. Following this, you have the speed indicator, which measures your speed in kilometers per hour. The FN can hit 580 kilometers per hour on deck. The tachometer is next. This measures your prop pitch. Following that, you have the manifold pressure. The manifold pressure is directly correlated to the throttle input you provide. And after this, you have the oil temperature gauge. The one you want to worry about is the top one. That's your actual oil temperature. The other one is your oil pressure. After this, you have the cylinder head temperature. We'll get more into that in a few seconds. And then your fuel gauge. Now, just a disclaimer, if you are new to IL-2, I would definitely recommend that you get at least a joystick, and really you need a throttle as well. Just because the game is extremely unintuitive if you don't have those two things. It's not enjoyable at all. But if you don't have that, when I'm going through the mechanics here in just a second of starting up the engine, getting it going, taking off, I'm going to list the default key bindings on the screen for you. And just later, if you have a joystick and throttle, or if you have one now, just know what you bound those to and follow through. So go ahead and start the engine, and while that's going through that process, I'm going to explain how the FN is a little different than some of the other Soviet planes like the Yak. Basically, all that the FN has that the Yak does not is that it uses a radial engine instead of an inline. And so rather than being water-cooled, you're using something called cowls to control the engine temperature. And it's actually really cool because it really simplifies the process when you get used to it. Right now the engine's about to start, and right when the props start to turn, you want to throttle up just a little bit, and then when you hear that sound, throttle back. Make sure you're on the brake when you do that so you don't take off. Turn your light on. And now right here, this gear you see turning, that's the cowl inlet control. And basically that controls the air that's coming into the engine. Now what's great about that is you just set it all the way open. Don't worry about it after that. That next gear is your oil radiator. You can set that all the way open, not have to worry about it the rest of the flight. The reason being is it was designed in a way to where it does not affect your flight performance. This wheel is your cowl outlet. That's all you have to worry about during flight as far as engine heat goes. You can actually see that gill open up a little bit and close. When the gill's open, you're slower, but your engine's cooler. When it's closed, you're faster, but it's hotter. And that's where the cylinder head gauge comes in. What you want to do is keep that below 2. So now we're going to push forward on the throttle just a hair until it starts moving. Now this plane is very easy to lose control in, so when it starts to move, pull back on the throttle, go very slow. Now if you notice on this taxi, I'm really not even pressing the rudders, I'm doing minute adjustments, but the torque on this engine is going to pull your plane left, even without rudder input. So I'm basically just letting it go on its own, maintaining that slow speed. It's also probably a good idea to go ahead and open up your RPM as high as it can go as well. And just if you're not aware, the RPM is what controls your tachometer. And again, the really cool thing about the FN is all you have to worry about as far as heat management goes is that cowl outlet, the gills. And just remember, you want to keep it below 2 on that cylinder head temperature. And if you're going too hot, go ahead and open up the gills. If you want to go fast and you're in combat, just close them. And that's all you have to worry about. You don't have to worry about your water temperature. You don't have to worry about your oil temperature. It's just that, the cylinder head. So now that we're lined up, I'm going to go ahead and press on the brake. And I'm actually going to push the throttle forward until it hits about 4 on the manifold pressure. And the reason I do that is because sometimes if this engine gets a really cold start, it can actually die on you when you're taking off. So I just go ahead and let that throttle run with the manifold at 4 for a few seconds. And then I cut the throttle back and get ready for takeoff. So now I'm cutting the throttle back, and before I take off, I want to go ahead and press the right rudder just a little bit, because when you push forward on that throttle, you're going to shoot off and you're going to want to spin left immediately. So push that throttle forward about 1/3 of the way, get going and get managed with your direction, then go 2/3 of the way, and then finally all the way. Keep it straight. And then once you hit 250, go ahead and lift off. And go ahead and bring your gear up. You'll actually notice those lights at the bottom. They'll turn from green to red, which means your gear's up. Now, one thing that's just awesome about this plane, you're going to notice how fast it can climb while maintaining speed. What we're going to do is we're going to go to 900 meters. I don't really know for sure yet what height the FN performs best at, but usually around 1,000 to 2,000 meters is what I like to fly it at. So we're going to climb up to about 800, 900 meters, and we're going to use the auto level button, which might be something you may not know about if you're a beginner. It really comes into handy. So now that we're at 800, 900 meters, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to cruising speed, because if we continue doing this with our cows completely closed, our cylinder head's going to overheat. So we're going to go ahead and open up that cowl, and then we're going to pull back on the throttle until it gets to 6 on the manifold, and we're going to adjust our tachometer to that 2 o'clock position. And what that's going to do is that's going to slow our speed down to about 400 kilometers per hour, and that's a great cruising speed. Now on to landing. Landing the FN is, in my opinion, the most difficult aircraft to land in all of Il-2. The reason being is there's so much torque on this engine that when you touch down, if you apply any brake pressure, if you apply any rudder, it's likely to accelerate those forces and cause you to spin out extremely quickly. So the idea is you want to approach this runway as straight as possible, and you want to touch down as early as possible, because you don't really want to apply any brake force, and you don't want to have to apply much rudder, because if you start doing any of those things too early, you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt. Okay, so here we are on our approach. We want to try to get parallel with that runway. That's what I'm doing right now. We want to set that tachometer to the 130 position and our manifold pressure to in between 3 and 4. We're starting that descent, getting to 300 meters. We want to make sure that our light is on. And we're just going to continue to descend. You'll notice the speed is a little high. It's at 400 kilometers per hour. That's fine. That speed is going to correct itself, get down to about 300 when we get parallel with this runway and fly on an even plane. So as we get closer here, we're going to look out at the wingtip. The idea is we want the wingtip to barely overlap with the runway as we're riding parallel along it. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm correcting that. I was a little outside. This is obviously recording, and I actually screwed this landing up a bit, but that's fine. I'm a beginner, especially in this aircraft. You're likely a beginner too, and this is the stuff that's going to happen in the game when you play it. Now what I'm doing here is I'm waiting for a 45-degree angle with the runway, and then I'll begin my turn. Now, when you start this turn, it's a good idea to go ahead and lower your landing gear and lower your flaps all the way. Now in the FN, it's not just a up-down flat position. You can manually adjust it, so adjust it to 100% down. Complete your turn, and you're going to try to line up as straight as possible and aim for the very beginning of the runway, because again, that's very important in the FN. You really don't have much room for correction once you touch down. Now what you're aiming for is a 3-point landing. You want all 3 wheels to touch at the same time, and that is where I messed up. You're going to find out what happens. My front wheels are going to touch first. It's going to make me bounce. My speed is between 25 and 20. I'm going to slowly cut the throttle back. You want to touch down at about 170 kilometers per hour. Now here's where my front wheel touches, and I bounce. It's okay. Pull back on the stick. Now if you notice, while I'm landing here, I'm applying very little rudder force. I'm not tapping the brake. When I do tap it, it's just for a split second, just for a hair. Because again, if you hold down that brake, you're going to accelerate those forces, that torque, and you're going to spin out very easily. Now as we're coming to a stop and slowing down, I've cut the RPM all the way, and I'm very lightly adjusting the rudder pedals. And still, I mean, it's very easy to spin out. You just have to practice. You have to get a hang of it. Now here we are at a stop. Cut your engines and open your canopy. And just a final tip for something that's worked for me so far in combat with the FN. When you're in combat, obviously you want to have that cowl closed all the way if possible, as long as you don't get above 2 on the cylinder gauge temperature. This thing, it fights best in the vertical, but it's very, very good at turning. It just doesn't regain its energy quickly. So don't turn unless you have to, but let's say an enemy gets on your 6. As long as you're going above 400 kilometers per hour, you can yank all the way back on the stick and you will not stall and you will turn sharp. I'm about to do it here in this example. Say somebody's on your 6. The FN has such a good roll rate that usually when you roll quickly like that, snap and turn, they can't follow you, especially if you roll 180 and head back the opposite direction. The FN just rolls too quickly. So that might help you if you ever get into a bind. And you see right there I stalled out because I got below 400 kilometers per hour. But if you actually have some separation from the plane behind you, what you might want to do instead of trying that trick is to just go ahead and just floor it. Close that cowl, RPM up, throttle up, and then climb, because there's really not any planes in the Luftwaffe that are going to be able to catch up to you if you do that. So long as you're close to the deck. Up high, you're going to get outperformed. But it looks like that's it. If you're new to IL-2, or if you've never flown this plane before, I think you should give it a try. It's a lot of fun. There's really not anything else that needs to be covered, I don't think. There is a supercharger on this plane that you have to engage once you get above 3,000 meters. It's just, you can check your key bindings for it. It's just something you engage when you get above that height to make the engine run properly. And really, you should never have to use it, just because you very rarely go above 3,000 meters in the FN. But thank you for watching, and happy flying.
I love airplanes.